staff, uh, uh, Bernard Joseph, and at the same time, Bruce Smith was there. And so, my D-line coach had played with Bruce, had played under that staff. They had moved on to Wake Forest, and they were saying, "Hey, you're the next Bruce Smith, Tyoka. We can make it happen for you. We coach Bruce. We coached your coach Bernard Joseph. We'll make you the next great D lineman. It'll just be at Wake Forest." And I started liking it. I started paying attention to it. And again, Penn State wasn't really, Wake Forest saying you're our number one defensive recruit, blah blah blah. And Penn State, it was kind of like, they were recruiting, but not as hard. And so I was like, one day, again, and my dad and mother wanted me to go to Penn State, but they were like, we're gonna let you make your own decision. So I woke up one day, I went to my parents' bedroom, said, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I'm going to Wake Forest. I made up my mind." And they were like calmly, "Okay, yeah, no problem." And so the next day I go to school and I get pulled out of class because the assistant coach from Penn State is there, and it's Jim Caldwell, who just was a former head coach of Detroit Lions, and at the time was the quarterback coach at Penn State. So he pulled me out of class. I think it was a study hall actually, and he says, "Ty, I don't know what you were thinking, but we want you. We're offering you a scholarship. We want you to come to Penn State." And I said, "Okay, coach, I'm coming." So I committed right there. And so I go home, and I'm waiting for my dad to get home from work, and I'm all excited. And he comes in the door and says, "Hey, Dad, guess what? Coach Caldwell showed up at Penn State. Showed up at high school and said, 'Hey, Penn State wants you.'" And I committed right there on the spot. He said, "Yeah, I know. I called him on the phone after you told me you were going to Wake Forest, and I told him you better get down here. You better get down here and make something happen." And so that's why he showed up. And I was like, "Oh man!" And so the whole father knows best thing sort of worked out for me, because it's really where I wanted to go. And I guess the rest was history, because we had a great time. My family and I loved our experience at Penn State and had a really good career there, and everything worked out just fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an understatement, Tyoka. I mean, you were second in all-time leader in sacks for the school. And, what blows my mind is looking back, it's, the fact that you went undrafted. But that, it really shouldn't, because I do feel like while, I was in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl, and, there are some brilliant football minds there, and I'm not knocking anybody, but I do feel like it seems like, some guys have like gut feelings about these guys, and they see them and they really like them. And then, for some reason, this guy runs faster than this guy, and this guy's taller than this guy, and this, and I think at the end of the day, you just miss out on players. And I think, that's what happened with you. And I think it happens with people all the time.
There's no question. And it's a tough job, to be fair to the evaluators.
Yeah.
Player personnel guys and college scouts in these departments. It's a tough business, because they got a lot of people to evaluate, and you can only look at certain things when you're evaluating players, and most of those things are measurables. And I was not a measurables guy. I wasn't super tall. I didn't bench press the entire world. I wasn't a fast 40 guy. I was very quick, but I wasn't a 40 guy. Now, my problem with that whole system is the things that they use to measure, they need to change. I mean, if you got a defensive lineman running 40 yards on a regular basis in a football game, you got some real problems, right? I mean, the things that measure football players probably need to change, because they're still antiquated in so many different ways. A 40-yard dash should not be run by anybody, who plays on the line. I mean, that's just offensive or defensive line. What's the point of running the 40? I mean, I probably ran 40 yards in my entire 12-year career in a play probably 15 times. Out of the thousands of plays that I played, I probably ran that distance 15 times. The other thousands of times, I was running a much shorter distance, because that's what the position requires. And so, that's just one example of how a guy's 40 time can make him seem better than what he really is. And then you got guys who just, when they watch tape, they just don't know what they're looking for. You got decision makers who are more attorney type guys, who are fans, who never really played the game, who never studied the game under a great coach or a great football mind. And so when they watch film, they're not seeing what they should see. And then also I would add in, I was sort of a late bloomer. I've kind of always been that way. I always matured later physically than everybody else. I was the youngest player in our recruiting class. Now, I did stay at Penn State for 5 years. I redshirted, so that helped. But I always seemed to mature physically a little later. I think that helped me last longer in the league. But also, I think I wasn't physically as strong, as fast as I became as I continued to grow and get stronger and better and all of those things. So, I used to be bitter, and I still don't really watch the draft because it's always a sore spot for me. But over time, that bitterness has sort of worn off a little bit. I'll never really love draft day because it was such a bad experience. But I've come to realize that, hey, mistakes like that get made. And, the mistake they made with me of not drafting me actually fueled my career. And I probably became a better player because of it.
Yeah. And you could be that guy that they, ESPN will always show, when they're going through the tweets and just trying to make people feel better about, not being drafted, everything. You could be that guy that's like, hey, I spent how many years in the NFL? I didn't need to be drafted. Right. I think,
and if you look at the average career, which is 3 years, that's encompassing everybody. I think I've said this many times. If the league would ever do an analysis of undrafted free agents' careers, I guarantee you it's point something. I think it's less than a year, because generally when they bring in undrafted free agents into camp, they only bring in a few. Each team only brings a few, maybe 3, 4, 5 a year, and those guys generally are in camp to hold bags, to be a tackling dummy. You just, they don't draft you because they don't think you can make the team. That's why you don't get drafted. And so I think if they did an analysis of undrafted players, my guess is it would be probably 0.8 years, 0.9 years, maybe 0.7 years, the average career. And, to go 12, obviously, I'm very proud that I was able to do that.
Yeah, it's honestly phenomenal. And, I was talking, I had T. Gray Scales, Indiana linebacker, who it blows my mind that he wasn't drafted. I thought he was like a third rounder, but, he's with the Rams right now. And, I was telling him, I'm like, it's not really, all about how you get there. It's about what you do when you get there. And he's definitely ready and he's hungry, and I think he's in a good spot. But I just, I think it goes to show you, you could have a lot of talent, or, you could have a really talented player, but, if he's not getting the playing time, like, I don't know if you know Emery Hunt, a football game plan, but, I had him on here as well. And like he was saying, like the Jets backup running back, Elijah McGuire, could have had a similar season as an Alvin Kamara if he got the playing time. And I think,
right.
I'm not saying he would or wouldn't, but I get his point where he's saying there's a lot of guys in this league that can play. And, I think when, especially, fans concerned, when they start saying, well, this guy's trash and this guy's a backup, really backups are just starters in waiting. Unless, they've kind of, been there for a while and they've proven, and then that's why they're a backup. But, a lot of these guys just don't get a chance. And I think, there's so much talent around this league. But I got to say, though, as much as, I do get frustrated with how the NFL does things. Like, definitely one name that comes to mind, Austin Davis with the St. Louis Rams back in 2015. I thought he played very well and then hasn't really had that chance since. But, there are guys like that come around and then they get lost. But nothing is worse to me than the NBA, because when you have 2 rounds and only the first round picks get guaranteed contracts, that blows my mind, Yeah,
it's tough, man, because you're fighting an uphill battle, and those later round guys, the second round in the NBA, later round guys in the league, and then also free agents, you really have less opportunity to screw it up. In the NFL, the first 3 picks, those guys could come in and play like absolute dogs, and they're going to make the team because of what was just invested in them. And so they'll get more opportunities to screw up and correct themselves than the later round guys and the free agent guys. And so it just makes it tough to just go on a normal learning curve as a young player. And, as a backup player, when you get into the game, you feel more pressure to make something happen, to create more playing time for yourself. But then when you do that, more often than not, when you try to press and make plays, you screw it up. And so same thing with there. You get a shorter hook. And so it could be a real tough situation. The more you're in it, you just figure out I can only control what I can control, and everything else, I'm going to let it go. And so my goal was, especially early on when I wasn't playing very often, was to use preseason as a audition tape for the entire league. So I would just make sure I would ball out during preseason, and doing that, it would do two things. One, it would showcase myself around the league. As tape went around, the league guys would see me and say that, hey, that guy can play. If we need him, we can go get him. But also, more importantly, it sort of forced the hand of my own team to make sure they wouldn't cut me. You know, I that was the thing. I wanted to make it. If they, I can't control who makes the team. I can't control if I get cut or not. But I'm gonna make it as hard as possible to cut 97. And then once the season starts, same thing. Make every practice like a game, so that when a coach looks at the practice film, I would make it really hard not to put 97 on the field. And that's all I could do. Beyond that, it was on them whether they played me or not. And it was many, many times, multiple years where I felt I wasn't getting the playing time I deserved. When you watch the film of either game or practice, I deserve to play more. But, part of it, when you're sitting behind a Hall of Famer like Warren Sapp, your play time going to get cut. That's just the way it is. Sometimes you're sitting behind, great players. So, it's a tough league. Any sport, professional sport, is tough because they're great athletes with great players. It's the top of the top, best of the best. And the key is to just find your niche and be consistently great. And generally, the consistently great ones, practice and games, are going to find their way to playing time. That's generally how it works. Obviously, there are other issues like injuries and contracts that let people get on the field a little bit more. But the bottom line is, like my dad used to always say, there's no shocking statement. The cream always rises to the top. And I heard that at an early age, and I believed it, and I just kept working to make that happen.
Yeah, I really I respect that, thinking, and I really like what you said. You mentioned, Warren Sapp. What were the first 6 years like before, coming to St. Louis?
Well, the first year I spent in Miami. So I actually was, that undrafted year, went to Atlanta. I was an undrafted free agent, led the team in preseason in sacks. They still cut me, put me on the practice squad. And then Miami claimed me off the practice squad. So being on the practice squad is sort of like being in the minors in baseball, but the team doesn't have your exclusive rights. So I practiced every day, had my own locker, jersey, and all that, but never played in the games. And you just sort of developing you as a young player, but they don't have your exclusive rights. And anytime you can sign with another team. And Miami reached out and said, we want to add them to our roster. And that's exactly what I did. So I went to Miami, finished off their season with them, played in 2 playoff games, which was amazing to get a chance to be on the same team as Dan Marino, who I had watched as a kid. And then, getting to know him was amazing. He was always great to me. And having add Don Shula to my resume as having a coach that I had played for, it was a great opportunity. And so, and then from there, I actually got cut by Miami the next preseason. So that was the second time I've been cut, and really was contemplating being done with football. I was in love with a game that I felt wasn't in love with me, and I was going to just move on. I got my degree in labor and industrial relations from Penn State with a business minor. I could go do something else. And so I had conversations with my dad and brother, and they sort of encouraged me to keep going. And back then, the World League was still there. And after talking to my agent, I said, you know what, I'm going to go sign with the World League. And I'm going to go kill the World League and get 3 or 4 teams, 5 teams competing to sign me. I'll pick the best situation where I really have a great opportunity to make it, and I'll see if I can really get this done. And so that was my plan. And before I could execute that plan, Tampa called with 2 games left to go and say, we're not going to sign Ty now, but as soon as the season ends, we want to sign him and bring him on. We don't even want to work him out. We like him from his rookie film. And at this time, it was at the end of 95, about to be 96. They liked me from my 94 rookie film and thought I had a chance to make the team. And so, my agent and I talked about it. And it's like, that Tampa team was not very good. I think they had 4 wins that year. And I said, you know what, if I can't make that team, I need to go ahead and retire. So I decided to take that offer. Excuse me. And I remember they flew me down the day after Christmas. The season had ended on Christmas Day. That was an early season then. And they flew me down and picked me up at the airport and said, we just fired Sam Weiss. We don't know who our head coach is going to be, but, obviously we still want to sign you. So, we had lunch and they showed me facilities. I signed and went back and watched on ESPN every day as everyone else did. They tried to sign the big tuna who had just left New York.